Thank you for listening. This is Chief Talk, discussing current issues related to policing and law enforcement, along with Mitch Sklar, my partner. This is John Zabrowski, and today we have a very special guest, and it's actually taken some time for us to get you here, and that's Colonel Patrick Callahan of the New Jersey State Police. Colonel Callahan, thank you so much for joining us. Just going through quickly a little biography for you. I know that your dad is retired State Police Major Mick Callahan. You have a Bachelor's of Arts degree from Villanova University and Master's of Administration of Science from Fairleigh Dickinson University. You began your career with the troops in April 1995, a member of the 115th class. And during your tenure, you served as the Recovery Bureau Chief in the aftermath of Superstorm Sandy. You've worked with state and federal partners to develop and implement long-term recovery effort strategies. You've served as the commanding officer of the Emergency Management Section and Assistant State Director of the Office of Emergency Management, Chairman of the Command and Control Subcommittee of the Emergency Management Section when New Jersey hosted Super Bowl, was that
48?
48, thank you very much, working to develop and implement all operations undertaken by Public Safety Compound. And most recently served as the Deputy Superintendent of Operations, supervising and directing the operational activities of 1,800 enlisted members assigned to the field operations, as well as the operational duties and responsibilities of the Traffic and Public Safety Office, Victim Service Unit, Fatal Accident Investigation Unit, Highway Traffic Safety Unit, and the Criminal Investigations Office within the field operations. Did I miss anything?
Sounds like I couldn't hold the job.
I would say that it's quite a full bounty of jobs. And at this point, still, you are state coordinator for OEM and Homeland Security as well.
Yes, of emergency management, yes.
Of emergency management, in particular during a pandemic that has stretched over 2.5 years. How's that been?
You know what? It's still, I know there's probably anybody who's listening thinks that, we don't talk about it anymore. I'm still on a call every day of the week, 7:30 in the morning, have been for the past 2 years. We talk about testing, we talk about outreach, we talk about technology, we talk about how we're going to get people boosted. The Commissioner of Health, Judy Persicelli, leads that call. But every morning at 7:30, I'm on that call as, again, really the state director, making sure that if we need to stand up mega sites, hospital capacity, all the things that we've been challenged with over the last 2 years. So we're still, and there's a surge going on right now. If you ask around, there's a lot of people that have that new variant right now, and we're concerned about it. Not to the level we were certainly a year or two ago, but it's we're not out of the woods yet.
No, we're not. And you talked about technology, and within that grouping and within law enforcement itself, technology took quite a change and quite a leap during the pandemic, and really it was led by the state troopers.
It did. I think of a few different arenas. I think of we needed our 71 hospitals in New Jersey. We needed that information from them every single night. In a home rule state, when everybody has their own CAD, their own RMS systems, their own databases, we were, I think, one of the first states that asked our hospitals to let us know where their staffing was, let us to know where their PPE was, let us to know were they on divert, were they out of beds. So we got to a point where we were sending ventilators to hospitals before they asked for them. And that was a technology that was pulling us all on the same platform. And then in the law enforcement front, asking every single department to ask us where they were with staffing, with quarantine, with officers that were out sick. So if we needed to support any department, whether it was large, medium, or small, that we'd be able to do that as an agency from a mutual aid standpoint.
Yeah, and reporting back to us as well on the local arena, how we were doing as a community, right? So allowing us to keep our officers safe, but also being able to provide our community with that much needed information as to what they needed to do.
The information sharing was, amazing, right? You stood up what they called then COVID stat. It's kind of morphed into a state stat. But the amount of information that we were able to receive locally, guys like John and Chiefs, our association played a role in helping to work with. I guess he started life as a captain and a lieutenant, actually, when the whole thing started. Joe Brennan and I worked very closely. Our organization worked very closely. But the lead that came out of the state police to coordinate all of that I think became the envy of the country. At least I've heard that from my colleagues.
Thanks, Mitch. I thought, and I think one of the key parts was if you think of how many executive orders were coming out almost every day.
Yeah.
And as in my role, I didn't have as much, that closeness with our local businesses as you would, Chief. And you knew the restaurant owners and all those business owners, and the questions that we were able to answer. It was truly a building the airplane in flight while it was on fire. But that platform each and every morning to get all of us together, executives from across the state, to ask questions, to answer questions, I thought was key. We weren't perfect by any stretch, but I think that line of communication was, as Mitch said, a national model.
Oh, I would say it was more seamless than you think. I know from a local level, each day we were able to get on. The information was concise, it was accurate, it was complete, and the opportunity for us to then be able to send that out to our communities and give them that type of information, it really calmed an awful lot in there, right? Everybody felt, when everybody was isolated, everybody felt anxious, right? And being able to tell our community on that very local level how we're doing, right? Simply how are we doing, was very important.
I know that from the feedback I've gotten from John's colleagues around the state, you just felt less alone. You felt less isolated was the word John
that's
used.
probably the best point, right? Less isolated.
Yeah.
In the time when you were isolated.
And the uncertainty, I mean, we don't have to all rehash March of 2020 again, God forbid. But the uncertainty of all that and just the uniqueness of what was going on, it just felt less alone, less isolated, less adrift by that daily call. And it often happened several times a day. The guidance that came out of the AG's office and from the SP, it was someday somebody will write a book about it, and that will play a big role throughout. The common thread throughout those chapters will be the work that they did during that time.
Yeah. And thank God there were no disasters, there were no tornadoes, there were no storms or floods or anything else that impacted us during that time period.
Didn't have nearly 17,000 guests from Afghanistan either. It was
Not to mention.
That was all the same week, too. Tornadoes and flooding and that mission.
But I think what it did, too, it galvanized an effort, right? And particularly, we've always had great relations between the troops and the local level, the local police. But I think it galvanized us as one group of law enforcement. Don't you agree?
No doubt. I mean, the camaraderie. I always talk about checking egos at the door and the color of our uniform, the patch on our sleeve.
Yep. Doesn't matter.
It's not. It doesn't. It's just that we talk about that thin blue line. That thin blue line is a pretty special place to be. It's unbreakable, and it's a special family to be a part of.
100%. And again, I go back to legacy family, right? You and your pop. Did you get a chance to work with your dad, or have an opportunity at all to celebrate your opportunity to be a member of the troops?
You know what? My dad retired about 5 years before I went through the academy. He did almost 29 years, retired as a major. But I was with him through so many parts of his career. Yeah. I still remember not only going to division headquarters, going to state police graduation, sitting at the kitchen table with the Kiwi and the Brasso out, and him letting me do his handcuff case, and that smell. I always joke with our troops that smell of hoppies and Brasso and Kiwi takes most back to the academy. It takes me back to my kitchen table where my father was not really, as I say, telling me how to live, but living and let me watch him do it, and that understanding of what it meant to be a part of something bigger and better than yourself. Now,
tell me. Was that your purpose then? Growing up, did you say, I'd like to follow in Dad's footsteps, or did you have other thoughts of what you wanted to do?
From my earliest memory, Chief, was I always wanted to be a Jersey trooper. I never remember anything else, and I'm one of 5. I'm the only one who followed in my father's footsteps. My grandfather was a Linden police officer for 32 years.
I'm sure stories he could tell.
Yeah. I had a great Chief Hart up in Linden gave me his personnel file recently, as well as an old uniform that one of his captains had in his closet, and it had F. Cool. Callahan on the inside pocket as you handed down that uniform, because it was expensive, just like we do today. And I have that hanging in my office right now in a shadow box. So, it's that torch of service has been passed on, and it was, I think I saw the reward in it. Again, not that we were all, we're going to buy a house in Malibu, but the reward of being in a service profession has been certainly special for me.
Yeah, I asked that question because my son is following in my footsteps as well. And growing up, or as he was growing up, I guess the experience kind of surrounded him, and you don't realize that, right? You're living your career, you're doing your thing, and your family's kind of experience certain things here and there. And it was a surprise to me, almost a shock when he said, "Don't you realize this is what I always wanted to do?" So I think it's very cool when someone wants to follow in someone else's footsteps. So
I agree.
Yeah.
But let me ask you a question off of that topic. But in your role, right, you're superintendent of state police. You have a large remit. You heard all the jobs that you have to do. Large number of personnel, sworn and unsworn, geographically spread throughout the state. Most of the policing in America is done small towns, small police agencies, where the chief of the agency can really get hands-on with personnel, take the pulse of how the troops are feeling, how they're doing, how the agency is doing. How do you manage that when you have an entire state, thousands of employees? How do you kind of take that pulse, get the heartbeat of the agency and the people that look to you for leadership?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mitch. Before I knew I was going to be the colonel, I had decided to go down a few years, over 5 years ago, and personally go to every single in-service. And that's talking to more than 3,000 enlisted members. That runs for months. Seeger every day, Warren County to Seeger. I was a lieutenant colonel of field ops at the time. And my whole intention at that point was because of how many troopers we had lost in the line of duty for traffic accidents and high rates of speed. Yeah. And I went there every day, never missed one, in order to take them through what my day was like, making those notifications and stressing them the importance of driving within their means and driving safely. And in that first week, I was appointed the colonel. And then what an opportunity, right, to go down and then talk to every single trooper personally, not to sit at my desk and do a video and put it out in an in-service, but to go and give them the opportunity to ask questions beyond line of duty deaths, everything that we thought from a vision standpoint. And I never lost sight of that. People said, don't forget where you came from. And I think there was a time when even our commanders, you didn't see a lot. So whether it's station visits, whether it's colonel's runs, I just started them back up where I have a group of troopers come down to division, even if it's 15 of them, and we go for a 2-mile run along the Delaware and come back to my office and have coffee and bagels and talk to back up a trooper on the turnpike. Monday I rode with the Auto Theft Task Force in Newark all day, jeans and a T-shirt. Right. Recovered 3 stolen vehicles within the first 20 minutes and saw a passion of those detectives. It's constant, Mitch, but it's important to be accessible and to not forget where you came from. And I just love being out. There's no better day than to be out there, whether it's having lunch with the troopers at a station, riding around Newark with them, looking for stolen cars, or just simply just being with them and hearing from them what do they think is broke, what's working, and real important to me. And probably one of the biggest parts of my management style is just to be accessible.
You talked about remembering where you came from. Did you always want to get to where you got?
You know what? Never thought of it once, quite frankly. Never was just thrilled and still am just to call myself a Jersey trooper. And to have that opportunity, grateful to certainly to Governor Christie and to Governor Murphy for keeping me on board. I was appointed the week before that election. And Governor Murphy certainly could have had other options. And then, but got to know him extremely well, probably more than any other colonel in the last 100 years due to the pandemic. But just a somewhat of a surreal experience, but a humbling one at that, understanding just how special this agency is for the past 100 plus years.
I know the pandemic kind of changed so much. several of your predecessors played a role at the International Association of Chiefs of Police and with the state police. Have you been able to meet with your colleagues like they did and participate in that?
I do. I think the next one is in Annapolis for the North Atlantic Colonels. In October, it's in Dallas.
We'll see you there.
Yeah, I'll be there. But it's, again, we've done a lot of things virtually.
Sure we have.
Right?
Yeah.
But and that's okay too. You start to realize that we're all facing the same challenges, whether that's recruitment, whether that's community engagement, whether that's public trust, whether that was the mitigation efforts through the pandemic. I don't know of any law enforcement agency that was able to really work from home. People still called 911. We still had the opiate epidemic. We still have auto theft, gun violence. COVID really didn't do much to tamp any of that other stuff down. We still had to be ready to respond, and I think we did.
Yeah, I think we would like to say that we were always, or prior to the pandemic, we were in a situation where you had downtime, but you don't. You're always actually leading in crisis, right? Because there's one crisis or another that's going on at any one time. Think about the issues that we're facing right now. And you mentioned the opioid issue, the stolen cars. They're at dramatically high levels at this point. And the other things that we're facing. So there's never a calm in the storm. The storm is just always managed, right? And you manage that by leadership. And you talked about the fact that you like to take that opportunity to see your troops all the time and spend time with them. You know, that's actually Abraham Lincoln, right? Who started that, right? By walking around, by leadership, by walking around and the opportunity to see what everybody's doing and hearing what they're doing. So that's a great style. And I'm sure you've had in your time opportunities to experience leadership training and opportunities.
I did. I think one of the best experiences was the FBI National Academy. That was 265 law enforcement officers from 22 countries. I think every state in our country was represented too. And just you think about 265 law enforcement officers and that experience that came to that 11-week course.
Find out it's a small world, though, right?
It really, and really
It
how
is.
similar
Yeah.
the things are. Whether my roommate was from Andorra, from the Pyrenees Mountains between Spain and France, and it was just a phenomenal experience that I took so much from. But then the constant phase training that we do, our goal is to not. And I tell our troopers, even the youngest ones, don't wait for the state police to tell you that you're a leader. Don't wait to sew those chevrons on your arm. You bought a lot through that gate at Seagirt. Whether you're in the military, you had prior law enforcement, you worked in a bank, don't wait for us to designate you as a leader. You could be a leader with a year on, 10 years on. And I think we saw that a little bit in George Floyd. There were some young officers around that horrific scene that hesitated to do anything about it because they were new. And that inactive bystander that we've talked about since that tragedy. Sure. I think we need to step up and not, certainly respect and understand that people bring a lot to this job.
Well, they most certainly do. And the fact that they come from so many different experiences, it helps us as leaders, right? The opportunity to kind of understand and put all those different personalities together and to be able to see where they can excel.
That's right. Yeah. We talk about diversity I know when we talk about diversity, most people go right to, race and ethnicity, but there's diversity of thought too.
Correct.
Which is important to have around the table. Particularly
for leaders. Right.
That's right.
Mitch and I learned a lot about that. We were just in Normandy, and we learned the Normandy experience, and it's really breathtaking. I don't mean breathtaking in the point of a tremendously wonderful experience, but a solemn experience. But one of the things we did learn is the difference between leadership by decentralization, understanding and listening, and allowing the troops the opportunity to provide information. Were centralized as Adolf Hitler and the Nazis did, where basically they really couldn't do anything until Hitler awoke late in the afternoon and barked out his orders and went about their business. And you could see the difference in what occurred.
Right.
Yeah, they were afraid to do just what Pat said, to be a leader at any level. right? To use their experience, what they brought through that door. They were just waiting for the command because they knew if they didn't, regardless of the consequences on the field, consequences for them could have been disastrous. You talk about the diversity of people coming in, including diversity of thought, geographic diversity of experiences. We're looking to diversify policing. It's not only moral and ethical, but it's kind of a legal mandate right now. But I know the state police is having the same problem that local police is having, finding people who want to come into the job. What is the thinking? What's the strategy that you're employing that we could steal from you to help us do some recruiting?
That's a daily conversation, Mitch. We just met last week with about 25 community leaders, all organizations from the NJSACOP, National Action Network. I think we struggle with recruiting of minorities. Our recruitment of black women and men is not good, quite honestly. And then you ask, why is that? So we're going to start, and I think it's going to happen within the next week, with a focus group of tapping into a generation of black women and men and asking them, if not law enforcement, why not?
Right.
What is that? Is that a perception thing? Is that trust? Is that your community saying you're selling out? Like I've heard from so many different things, but we're really trying to understand that reason as to why. And what came up in that meeting was a reckoning discussion that came up. One gentleman said there needs to be a national reckoning, and I agree with that. But I don't think that is something that can happen with that is a one relationship, one person at a time reckoning, perhaps. This Monday, as a point of that, and maybe a moment of healing, the Jersey Four, those 4 young black men that were shot on the Jersey Turnpike, are coming to headquarters. I'm going to meet with them, and I want to hear from them. And we're also probably going to have about 20 college students in that room. I want to show them where we've come since that tragic night on the Turnpike. And I think that those types of meetings and those types of reckonings, if you want to call it, I think will hopefully change the perception, and that you will have people that, like I like to say, humanizing the badge, that they see us as Sunday school teachers, baseball coaches, neighbors, and those events that we do in the communities when we're not in we're out of uniform more than we're in it.
We are.
And it's important what you do out of uniform, because everybody knows you're in law enforcement. I don't care what you say. And that's why I think what we're starting the state police with, I want that community engagement to be woven in the fabric of us and of all law enforcement, and to undertake what I call that guardian peacekeeper mantra as opposed to warrior.
Right.
Although I said it earlier in the week when Mitch was with you, still have to be able to throw that switch on and go warrior mode sometimes. But if you think about the majority of the calls that we're asked to go to, it's to be a guardian and a peacemaker. And
people looking for help. Right?
Yeah.
And we're here to help.
People in crisis and in chaos. And I think that that paradigm shift is not, again, that doesn't happen overnight. But
and going in that direction, on a personal note, what has been your, maybe not transformation, but what has been your path from 1995 on to here? What have you learned from your experience?
Yeah, I'll point to my faith, Chief. For one, grew up in a church, very mission oriented. I've been to Haiti. I've been to Appalachia to repair homes. I've been on the board for Habitat for Humanity. I've been to New York and Philly and Easton to feed the homeless. And it was funny when you got to certain spots like that and people asked what did you do when you were with people from around the country repairing homes in West Virginia? And you said I was a trooper. And I think they were a little surprised. But I think it's all rooted in service and that path to carry that over when you are in uniform and understanding that need to be compassionate. Empathetic, and to treat people with dignity, respect. I mean, that urge to judge, especially in this profession where you're trained that you need to size people up pretty quickly because your life may depend upon it, right? So at one end, we're telling you need to size them up almost judge them, quite frankly. But at the same time, your actions, you got to know the difference between a motor vehicle stop of people coming home from Hershey Park and the person who's running 2 kilos and has a loaded weapon in between the seat. And then how do you balance that? Because those 2 stops could happen 5 minutes apart from one another, and but I think I've taken a lot from my personal and my faith journey to this job. And I think when troopers see me out there, Trenton Area Soup Kitchen, or on horseback in Atlantic City in the underserved communities, and connecting with our communities in real positive days, not around yellow crime scene tape, not around crisis or civil unrest, I think, I don't know, you just start to see this wall melt away and this unity and really community. And it's still, the journey continues in that front.
And I think the journey has to continue, right? We have to learn. We have to continue to have that experience. How many times has someone said to you, Colonel, why are you doing that?
I don't know if I've ever been...
maybe because you're Colonel.
Maybe that's true. But even before I was, I do it selfishly, is my candid answer. And I got back from Haiti, and I had the ability the opportunity to address our church. And when we come back from a mission trip like that, we talk about what people don't have. We talk about what they don't have with regards to food or shelter. And right now, Haiti is they had 150 people killed last week down there. It's heartbreaking. But I focused on what they had. I stayed at an orphanage where 58 kids woke up at 5:30 and rose up singing. And I slept in a tent on that roof, and to listen to 58 kids who material-wise had nothing, but got up praising God each and every day. My wife was there in 2012 when the earthquake hit. I didn't know where she was for a few days. And the same thing, with aftershocks and buildings crumbled and mangoes falling off the trees, they sang. And still focused on God being good, and I focused on what they had, and I try to do that in this profession too. What everybody can bring something to the table, and that's a pretty special place to be.
What would you tell young Pat Callahan when you were about to take that oath? What would you tell him from the perspective you have today that you didn't know at that time?
You know what? I think I wish I had gotten involved in service and mission earlier. Quite frankly, that happened later on in life for me.
But were you ready as a young man? I don't think I would have had it within me to be that selfless as a young guy.
When I was young, I got married when I was 21. I've been married for more than 32 years. Had 4 kids by the time I was just 26. There wasn't a whole lot of time probably for mission and service other than in my own house.
You were doing service in your own way. You were feeding a young family as a young guy.
My wife was an RN, and I worked midnights and came home. We never used daycare. But I think to take the opportunity, and I stress this to the troopers, that wherever you're assigned, most of us think of troopers as road troopers, but wherever I went, and I take as much as you can from every assignment that you're in. To your point earlier, there's 1,200 civilians, too, in the state police, the backbone. And sometimes there's this enlisted versus civilian mentality that they watch those personnel orders come out and transfers and promotions, and we come in and out of their lives like, busboys in a restaurant, as Stephen King would say in Stand By Me. But and to really hone in on what they bring to the table and to treat them as family too. And I think that trying to soak up as much as you can in every assignment. And I think about being assigned to the Attorney General's office in budget operations, trying to understand how technical budget, the governor's recommendation, that was the most un-law enforcement thing that I thought at the time.
Sure.
But now,
yeah.
To sit with the treasurer and at a budget hearing and understand the importance, because it gets the troopers the tools that they need for the job that they do.
That's the number one topic we're requested at the Chiefs Association from our membership. Yeah. Training and education on budgeting.
Yeah, it's and I learned a lot and never forgot it too. I was on with OMB this morning talking to Office of Management and Budget, and again, it wasn't the most glorious time of my career, quite frankly, but in this position and in this role, to be able to sit there and advocate for the things we need, systems, vehicles, classes, and point to those gaps in those shortcomings. It's really invaluable.
And I'd say if you're giving advice to a younger trooper, I think one of the things, and at least one of the things I've seen, is as you're coming up the ranks or as you're new, you really don't take that opportunity to breathe, right? You want to go from call to call. You want to do the best you can possibly do, but you don't take that opportunity to breathe. And what I mean by that is that moment to experience perhaps what that person is going through that you're trying to help. And also, whether you have a partner next to you or an older, a more senior officer, take the opportunity to understand their experience as well. All right. And I talked about legacy before, but you have to understand who you are and what you're about. Younger troopers, younger police officers are so intent on that next moment that the current moment isn't important enough, but that current moment produces what we're going to be eventually, right?
That's right.
You need to take that opportunity to breathe.
Yeah, it's a great point. Great point. You said we're worried about the next call in CAD and thinking about where our partner's on a stop and not understanding that encounter, and I've said this too, you may have 7 minutes with somebody on a motor vehicle stop, whether they're from Kansas, Ohio, or town, to make that impression of what they think about the New Jersey State Police. And you can write them a ticket for 92. I've received letters from people that have received moving violation summonses telling me how professionally they were treated by. That's a pretty rare thing.
Sure
Usually
is.
it's an attitude and demeanor complaint. But to receive a letter of appreciation from somebody that received a motor vehicle summons for doing 92, and that's important because that person who you stopped is going to talk to their pastor, they're going to talk to their beautician, they're going to talk to their kids' coaches. And I think when I get talked back to that one relationship at a time, I think that's a key piece of this profession too.
I know those letters have an impact. I can give you my own little anecdote. So I was on the way up 295. I headed to the State House for an event. I don't have a police vehicle. Nobody knew who I was. I got a flat tire. I was pulled over to the side. It was snowing. It was awful weather. I was obviously not in a very happy place, being late. Troop comes up behind me, helps me out, made sure everything was okay, found out what was going on, waited with me, and then took off. So he didn't know who I was at all. I sent a letter to the superintendent at the time, right? And because I know him, I was able to make sure that letter got directly to him. A few years later, I'm again at the State House at an event. Plainclothes trooper is with the superintendent, and he points at me, and he says, "Thanks for that letter." I guess he found out that who I was at that time, got back to him some way. Clearly, somebody took that letter seriously. So I know that it is important that when people treat you nicely like that the people that are treated nicely, let it be known.
And I write every single one of them. I write every single person that writes a letter, good or bad, about a trooper. They get a response, a personal response from me. And as Chief knows, you need 10 of those good letters to offset the one bad one.
That's right. Well, I never got a letter back saying they got mine, but obviously the word got out.
You can write me anytime, Mitch.
Okay, all right. Well, hopefully I will never need to do that again.
But you're right, though. It's not the big moments in life that are memorable. It's those little snapshots, right? Those little moments in time that really create either that bond or really turn that recruitment effort into a really long slog, right? That's really what it's all about.
Right. So we heard long ago, I forget who it was, but one of our presidents, told me everyone in the profession is a recruiter.
Yeah.
Right? You're always recruiting. Everywhere you go, everything you do, you're recruiting. I call it an evangelist. An evangelist for policing profession and for New Jersey. Yeah. That's the way I see our role.
Colonel, what is directive number 1?
Our first one, it was from Colonel Schwarzkopf.
Yeah.
He signed that on December 5th, 1921. And at the core of it is really about treating people with compassion and according to the Constitution. But the one line that I love, there's two really, is that the prevention of crime is of greater importance than the punishment of criminals, and that we do our jobs with a respectful bearing on all classes. And that was 101 years ago. and I said it earlier in the week at an event. That's about as timeless in 2022.
Yep.
Just an order when those first troopers left Seegert in that blinding snowstorm on December 5th, 1921. That was his first order. And it hangs in every single state police office as a constant reminder of that first general order. And it's something I take so, not only personally and professionally, and my relationship with the Schwarzkopf family goes still to this day with his granddaughter, Cindy Schwarzkopf, and the amount of respect and pride we have for not only our first colonel, but for her dad, General Schwarzkopf. Pretty special General Order Number 1 that we will always adhere to.
Our organization is a little older than the state police. We were around when the state police were formed, and we had the minutes going back to 1912 when the organization was founded. And Colonel Schwarzkopf shows up quite often beginning in 1921, including we changed the bylaws to allow him to become a member. And then during the whole Lindbergh kidnapping, he would come to the state chiefs meetings to brief the members about how it was going. Several of our members went out in the field and helped do some investigation. So from the very beginning,
That's awesome.
It is. But I will give you, so I have the application from the second colonel, the third colonel, everybody who joined the organization. I'll find them for you. I'll give you one of them.
That's
You
cool.
can hang
Thanks,
it up
Mitch.
as well. There was always a long-standing, going back over 100 years now, relationship between local police and the state police. From your perspective as the current colonel, what's your view on that relationship?
I tell you, I think it's another place where the rest of the nation looks to New Jersey. Again, I've never seen, I witnessed it even on Monday with that auto theft task force. There's local, county, state, mission-oriented, again, not focused on, and I think there might have been a time where, troopers that look down upon a county or I just don't see that. I see this tremendous camaraderie and women and men that are really focused on the mission at hand. I see it on our Internet Crimes Against Children task force. Again, that blend, that task force mentality, trying to protect the most vulnerable amongst us. I think that state stat call, Mitch, that you talked about every Tuesday and Thursday on Core Stat, auto theft, gun violence, opiates. It's just really counterterrorism. I just see a complete focus on mission and not on our patch on our sleeve.
Yeah, I think we are the envy of the country in a lot of ways, right? I mean, I'll stand up and say, New Jersey, we do it better than anyone else. And I've been doing this for 23 years, and I get to talk to people who do my job all over the country. And they always ask, how can we do there what you do in New Jersey? I think it's a testament to leaders like yourself and John and your predecessors, as well as the men and women on the street. I think we do it right here in New Jersey. Not perfectly. We can always be better at everything we do. But I'm an evangelist for what we do. I think we do it right here. We have a good thing going that we continue to try to improve, and that takes leadership. It takes leadership at all levels. So, how do you, in the state police, prepare that next generation of leaders? Eventually, all of us will find our way somewhere else. The men and women that come behind us. What do you all do to prepare that next generation?
Yeah, I think beyond the training, which is a key point, I think, and I stress it, when we're either having a promotional ceremony or, have people in the office to hand out today. We had 6 promotions. I was out of the office, but the deputy superintendent had 6 members in his office to give them their promotional certificates. We're not going to be here forever.
No.
And I know I'm the 14th colonel, but each one before me passed on that baton to the next leader and leaders. And I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure, when we talk about leaving it better than we found it, that's a common phrase that we all use, and not just by painting walls and, giving upgrades to the grounds, but really by policy and by leading by example, and that they see in me what I hope them to become. And again, never thought I would be the colonel of the state police, quite frankly. I never aspired to it. I remember sitting in the academy and having a historian come in and write the badge numbers of the prior colonels on the chalkboard, and sitting there wondering, not even thinking that my badge number would be amongst those. But again, I don't focus on rank. I think in a paramilitary organization, it's hard to not sometimes get wrapped up around rank and ego and salutes and military bearing. But I am the true believer in servant leadership, and every time I'm with those troopers, I tell them that I work for them and that they don't work for me. And I hope that they take that away, that when they get to be sergeants and squad supervisors and station commanders and bureau chiefs, that they really think that they work for the people that are truly subordinates to them, but that they're there to remove obstacles and to get those folks the resources they need to best serve the citizens of the state. So I hope that's pretty much how we do it, by letting everybody know that we work for them.
That might be the greatest responsibility that we have as leaders of organizations, right? Succession planning. And it's not succession planning simply on who's the next person that's going to replace you, right? But it's the ability to build that mission, right? That mission that lasts on, and carry that legacy on as to what our purpose is here, correct?
That's right. Spot on.
All right, let me ask you another question, not so much about leadership development, but in your role here as the leader of the state police, and in a lot of ways policing in New Jersey, what do you see as the threat environment right now?
I think, we talk about cyber a lot. I know that falls in both the state police and homeland security realm. I think the threat of homegrown violent extremists, we saw that certainly in Buffalo with an 18-year-old. The internet has the ability to reach that person that's sitting in their basement, and that's a scary place to be when you can find like-minded, radicalized people at the click of a key. That is scary, and because they're not in a greater network, that's where law enforcement always was able to, whether it was organized crime, it's racketeering.
Not so simple now.
Yeah, it's not simple when you're tapping in from your laptop in your bedroom, and that threat concerns me. And we see it. How many times do we see it in the last week between Buffalo and California? And I think again, to the relationships that we have here in New Jersey, that threat, and again, we've talked about it already, the auto theft and that's nexus to violent crime, that people, to leave your fob in your $100,000 SUV is a head scratcher to me. But they're not just stealing your BMW X7. They're stealing it, and then it's being used in a drive-by shooting 30 minutes later. And I think if we had our citizens take some personal responsibility, about half of our stolen cars are because of that. Leaving it running when you go in to grab a coffee, leaving the fob in. So I think a lot of threats, Mitch. Probably you need another episode.
Yeah, I got it. So the threats are different now, I'd imagine. I mean, there's some constants probably through human history, but it's different now than when you started. So policing should be different than when you started. The threats are, and then I assume that policing will have to be different 27 years from now, like it was different 27 years ago. So how does the profession, how do the people in the profession keep up with the evolving threats, and how do you all as leaders help evolve the profession?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I immediately think of the one thing that comes to mind is that Arrive program that we recently started. So we started that down in Cumberland County because we cover 14 municipalities there. And if you had told me 27 years ago that a trooper would be partnered up with a mental health screener, I would have said, I'm not so sure that's ever going to work. But when 50% of calls for those emotionally disturbed folks struggling mental crisis, 50% of those end up in a use of force. Since we started that program, in nearly 50 calls for service, plainclothes trooper, partnered up with medical health screener, diverting people away from the criminal justice system to the health system, 0 uses of force. If you think about that.
Yeah, that's very telling.
It's powerful, and I think change in law enforcement is tough. We joke. We have a joke that that all we want is change, and then when it comes, it's the last thing we want.
Nobody likes change.
Just talk to the union presidents. But I think we need to approach this as a service-oriented profession. And when we talk about protecting and serving, and I know that motto is painted on a lot of doors around a lot of towns and a lot of states in this country, but that's at the foundation. And protecting and serving, we have to be creative. We have to do it to best serve those and take different approaches. We've talked about opiates, never arresting our way out of the opiate epidemic,
Sure.
Finding people recovery coaches, making sure hospitals have beds. It's a different way of thinking. You know, when I would lock somebody up with 100 decks of heroin and drop them off in the Sally Port at Hunter County Jail, I felt like my job was done. I'm pretty certain that those folks probably got locked up, and maybe some of them didn't even make it through the next month, quite frankly. So I have a very different perception now of policing and how service-oriented it is, and what we really need to do to best serve our citizens.
Yeah, we see that all over the state. There are a lot of police agencies now who are partnering with Volunteers of America or some other service entities to not simply pick someone up, but to find out what they can do to keep them from the next one, the next TV call, the next time they're on. So they have housing assistance and food assistance and job training. That is going to be, like it or not, that is going to be the role. Police are going to play a part of that role, and we see that coming.
Right.
Collaboration. I think that's the biggest issue, right? I think early on, or at least I know in my career, I think as a police officer, you said, I got this. I know what I'm doing. I've got this. But now it's much more common to reach out and ask for assistance for that service, right, to help someone else. I see collaboration on a scale that I've never seen before, and that's fantastic, right? It's not just between the troops and the local level. It's between the troops, the local level, our hospitals, our medical professions, our private entities as well, all trying to be able to get those keys that would help others. Never seen that before.
That's it.
And I think we've also grown as our own organizations in the same way to help our troopers and our police officers who may be in crisis as well, correct?
Yeah, it's no doubt. We started, we sadly experienced too many suicides a few years back, almost back to back to back. And from that, we started our Office of Peer Advocacy, which is a blend of both enlisted members. Sometimes troopers want to talk to troopers, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes they want to talk to a civilian too. And I think that resource, that emotional survival that we talk about and what this job does to you and the exposures that you're done, I think I've talked with a lot of chiefs and colonels around the country about resiliency. And I liked one chief from Texas said it best. He said, if you experience let's say recovering a drowned 4-year-old from a pool, we talk about resiliency as bouncing back, but you can never bounce back to the way you were from that, especially when you go home and you have dinner with your 4-year-old daughter. But we think of resiliency now as bouncing forward, understanding the exposures that you've had, understanding what this job can do to you, and letting not only our troopers in the academy, but their families know from a self-awareness standpoint who to pick up the phone. I have my few go-tos when I'm having that day, and I'm like, oof. And I let troopers know that too, that it's okay to not be okay. We're always, rub dirt on it and I'm good. And but if you go home and climb into a bottle of Jack Daniels and disengage from your family, that can be a pretty dark spot.
Sure it can.
Yeah, that's another area New Jersey is kind of leading the way. Resiliency training, resilience. We do a little work internationally. We're connected with the Police Scotland, the National Police Force in Scotland. We're sending a group there to their delegation to their International Academy this summer. They've asked us, we usually ask them for some inputs, especially about policing without weapons and some other things that they do pretty well. They've asked us to do an input on resilience and on the New Jersey's resiliency program. And so it's another area where I think we've recognized policing is different going forward than it was in the past.
No doubt. And understanding that and I've seen it. I've seen those attitude and demeanor complaints, and as a commander in field ops pulled some folks in and said, "What's up?" somebody just came into the station to ask for an accident report, and you went ballistic on them through that little silver hole in the glass, right? And it was sick daughter, potential divorce, and if you're not, it's one thing to go down and Seagirt once a year and run a mile and a half and do your push-ups and sit-ups, but if we're not checking on people's souls and their heads, they're not going to serve the public well.
No, I think a lot of times we forget what that when our officers are coming to work, they're coming to work with an awful lot of stuff that they've already experienced that day, right?
Right.
And we have an obligation to help them as well on what that might be, and an understanding that you're not always at your best every day.
No, I've regretted a few stops in my career, quite frankly, because I was having a bad day, and then somebody felt the brunt of it. But I think understanding that and giving people the resources to work through those is certainly key. When you're 3 times more likely to take your own life in this job than to be killed in the line of duty, that in and of itself is an epidemic too.
All right, well, that's a really good note to ask this question, but okay, what's your pitch to have somebody come and join the state police, right? So as we kind of wrap up, we talked about recruiting, we talked about the next generation. Make your pitch to anybody who's out there deciding what they want to do.
Perfect segue, Mitch. And we are just about, probably in the next month, we're going to open up an online application process. So I'm asking every single trooper to try and get at least 3 folks to come online. What I would say to young men and women out there, you want to talk about a call to action. You want to talk about a first responder, pandemic or not, the reward of this job, to see the difference that you can make in the lives of people. I think we have one of the most impacts of any profession when you can connect with children, or you can connect with folks in long-term care and all in between. It's such a rewarding profession, and I think if folks gave us, anybody, again, not just the state police, but all of law enforcement, a look as to how rewarding it can be in serving others. Everybody can serve. I think Mother Teresa once said that a long time ago, and to serve in this capacity and in this way through the challenges that we have, I hope that some national scrutiny or stories don't deter people from coming to what I think is the most noble profession on the face of the earth.
Agreed.
I've heard you mention that term before. I've been in a room with you, made many speeches, including this Tuesday, where you talk about the nobility of the profession, and I think that is a perfect way to kind of make the pitch and wrap it up.
Yeah. Colonel, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate the opportunity. It took us a while. Your schedule is extremely busy.
Yeah, it was. I appreciate your patience, and it's great to sit with you, Chief, and with Mitch, and always a phone call away.
Come back again.
Will do.
Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for listening. This is Chief Talk.